Alright, what's up guys, MTG Match for you, and today we're going to take a look at Prismari for the card review, so let's jump right into it with Gallows of Prismari. Prismari's Eldragon is 4 mana for a 3/4 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you create a treasure token. And it says artifacts you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. So a lot of stuff going on here. First off, what I like about this Elder Dragon is that it's, compared to the other dragons, it's fairly cheap to cast. It's only 4 mana, as opposed to like the 7 mana value of like Witherbloom and Lorehold Elder Dragons. So I like this already better for that reason. It's just easier to cast and easier to get in on into the game. And then it's got an immediate effect, right? It's gotta create a treasure token, which is just nice. And then it gives all your artifacts, basically makes all your artifacts mana rocks for instants and sorceries. And I think this effect is super cool. First of all, we have the likes of Goldspan Dragon in the meta already, which is like a proven good card, right? And this can go well together with Gallows of Prismari, because the Goldspan Dragon creates treasure tokens, and then instead of needing to sacrifice them, you can actually tap them to cast your big instant sorceries. And Prismari is all about casting big instants or sorceries, so actually I'm very certain this card is going to be super fun. Concerning competitiveness, I still think there is some good stuff here. I've just, when I saw this card, I just checked out the standard card list to see, alright, so what kind of cheap artifacts exist in the game that would make sense to put this together in a deck with, because running Gallows of Prismari and then a bunch of artifacts to make use of it, I think only makes sense if those artifacts by themselves are easy to run. I don't think that if you want to build a whole deck around Gallows of Prismari, this would work well, because it can just get removed, or sometimes you might not draw it throughout the game. So if you look at Gallows of Prismari in a way that I have my usual, let's say, Izzet/Jeskai control deck, and in those decks I can just naturally fit in some artifacts and then run Gallows of Prismari to get additional value out of them. I think that's pretty cool. And artifacts you could look at is something like Glass Casket. Glass Casket is actually an artifact that removes a creature, and well, after the creature got moved, it has no use, right? So this goes perfect with Gallows of Prismari. Another idea is something like a Mazemind Tome, right? Sometimes you don't want to draw a card, you might just use it to ramp yourself. Or Witching Well is also really nice from Throne of Eldraine. It's a 1 blue mana artifact that when it enters the battlefield you scry to, and then later you can sacrifice it for 4 mana to draw 2 cards. Just a nice play in the early game, and this goes well with Gallows of Prismari. So I actually quite like that, and yeah, there's just a lot of ways to use this card. So let's see, I think I would put Gallows of. Maybe this is a tier 2 card. It might just be because it ramps this so well, and Prismari is all about casting big CMC spells. I mean, it's very easy to get rid of, right? That's obvious, but gets your treasure token, so you always have some value. So I know I could see this like being tier 2, somewhere there. I think people might fit this into, Prismari/Jeskai control decks to just get some value and then build some artifact synergies. I think that would be super cool, and I'm definitely going to try it. So I think this could be tier 2, maybe just tier 3. But again, the big upside of this specific dragon is that it's so easy to cast at just 4 mana value, right? So realistically, I probably have to put this into tier 3, but with a lot of like upside into tier 2. So I'm gonna leave this in tier 3. Next up we got Magma Opus. 8 mana instant. Magma Opus deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. Tap 2 target permanents. Create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. Draw 2 cards. And then you can pay double hybrid Izzet mana. Discard Magma Opus to create a treasure token. I think this card is very good for 2 reasons. First of all, as we've seen with Gallows of Prismari, Prismari has this big theme of, you know, cheating out big mana spells. In the case of Gallows of Prismari, you just have, you know, additional mana rocks to help you cast stuff. As we're going to later see in this card review, there are tons of ways to reduce the cost of instant sorceries or even cheat them out completely from the graveyard. And this is where Magma Opus gets its power from, because you have the discard outlet on the card itself, right? For just 2 mana, you discard, create a treasure token, and then you can cast it from your graveyard cheaper or for free even. So that's pretty cool. And then if you get this effect off, it's really, really good, right? You can remove a bunch of creatures, you draw 2 cards, you get a body on the board. I think the tap to target permanence is the worst part about this, because I don't know, if you're casting this on your turn because you're cheating it out, the tap to target permanence is relevant. You know, make stuff unblockable, but then again, they will just untap on your opponent's turn. So I don't like the tap to permanence part of this card. But the rest I think is really, really cool. It's just good value, and you have to think about this card. You're never going to cast the full 8 mana cost of it. You can either cheat it into play, cast it like greatly reduced, cast it by like 2, 3, 4 mana reduced, and then you're looking at like 4 mana for this 4, 5 mana, and then this becomes really, really good. The only problem I see with this card, specifically in the interaction with, you have this in your graveyard and want to cast it for free. If you can cast instant sorcery from your graveyard for free, it obviously competes with other high CMC instant sorceries. Most namely the ultimatums that are in standard right now. So this competes with those ultimatums a lot. But this has the other benefit that you can just discard this to your graveyard by itself, right? Because it has the effect on the card. So I think Magma Opus is just a cool card. I think it's just very solid, very decent. I kind of want these to be higher. I really like these. I don't know, are they too I mean, this gives you so much value, right? I have really high hopes for Prismari. I don't know. Magma Opus, it's the thing is, it just competes with other high CMC stuff, right? Hard to tell. I mean, even the Jeskai ultimatum is really good if you can just cheat it out. But this can actually be reused. So I think I'm gonna keep this in tier 2. I want to make this work, really. I hope it's going to be tier 2. Next up, we got one of my favorite cards from the set. It's the dual modal Planeswalker, Rowan, Skull of Sparks, and Will, Skull of Frost. So on the front side, we got Rowan in red mana, and on the back side, we got Will in blue mana. So let's go through these. I've already gone through these in another video, so I'll not get too deep into them, but let's just read over them once. So both of them have the static ability, instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And for Rowan, you can +1 her to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and if you've drawn 3 or more cards this turn, she deals 3 damage to each opponent instead. And then she got a -4, which says you get an emblem with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may pay 2. If you do copy that spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. So pretty cool stuff here. And then on the other side, we got Will, which has the same static effect. And +1 up to 1 target creature has base power and toughness 0-2 until your next turn. -3, draw 2 cards. And -7, exile up to 5 target permanents. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So I've already talked about this card quite much. I think the best part about this card is the static effect. It's the sorceries cost 1 less to cast, which is it's just so good. Like, I really thought about this and just think about it this way. You play like a control-y style Prismari Jeskai deck. And by the way, I'm saying Jeskai control a lot in these videos because I really think that Strixhaven is giving a lot of new stuff to this archetype, and I think it's going to be really good. And I'm also a big fan of it. But just think about it as a fact: if you play Rowan, instant sorceries cost 1 less to cast. Let's say you play Rowan in turn 4, you have 1 mana left open. And then with this 1 mana left open, you can cast a Saw It Coming because it costs 1 less to cast. To protect your Rowan from, removal and so forth. So just for counter spells, this is incredibly powerful. And then obviously, for all other purposes, also really good. With Ron on the board, you might be able to cast your Foretold Aaron's Epiphany 1 turn earlier. I just really like the static effect. And concerning the abilities of Rowan, the +1 is like completely relevant. I mean, if you play Jeskai Control, you have Nico Ares, with which you might be able to draw 3 or more cards a turn, and then you can deal 3 damage to your opponent, which can be a win condition. That's just some nice way to close out the game. But you get in for 1 damage here and there. It's not that big of a deal. But then the -4, I think, is what was really exciting. This emblem is just very, very nice. Every time you cast an instant sorcery, pay an extra 2 to have a copy. It's even less than you would pay on a Lithoform engine, where you have to pay 3 to copy something, and this is on the emblem. So the emblem, I think, is super good. And then Will, I think, is a bit less exciting. It costs 5 mana. However, just think about it this way: you have this flexible card because it's dual mold, right? And then maybe in the early game you got your emblem off or something, or you only got a Ron on the board. Putting Will on the board is not that bad, right? You got this static effect, and if you have both of these on the board, you get the static effect twice, which is then like really, really powerful, reducing all instant sorceries by 1. And then Will, can just occasionally turn off a creature, making the base bar and toughness 0-2. But I think the biggest play pattern is going to be: you have Ron on the board, you play Will, -3, draw 2 cards. And then it's still on the board, and then if it survives, you just +1 him, turn off creatures, and you always have the static effect as a bonus. So I really, really like this Planeswalker duo. I think it's super cool. And where do we put these? Well, I'm very optimistic for these cards, I gotta say. I almost want to put them tier 2. I mean, for me, they're at least tier 3. But for me, they're tier 2, and I think it's just so flexible, and just the static effect is so nice on a Planeswalker. And in a control deck, you would just love to have these reduced spells, right? Reduced instant sorcery. So I also put these in tier 2. Next, we got Prismari Command. Obviously, one of the first spoilers. And I think this is really, really powerful. 3 mana instant, choose 2. Prismari Command is 2 damage to any target. Target player draws 2 cards and discards 2 cards. And target player creates a treasure token, destroy target artifact. I think this card is absolutely amazing. You're going to have like graveyard synergies with all these spells. Not only like in Lorehold, but also, well, basically in Lorehold /red, but also with Prismari. This gives you a way to just get those cards in the graveyard in the first place. And then, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, just a favor, it's really, really nice. And deal 2 damage to a target is very relevant. It's a storm, it hits a lot of stuff. So, and even if your opponent has no creatures, no planeswalkers, you can just go face with this. And you're always going to find a mode that benefits you right now, and then you can choose another mode that will benefit you later, right? So, the deal 2 damage to a target, remove a small creature, remove an agile innkeeper, and then, for example, create a treasure token to ramp. That's already amazing. Or you want to remove that Emmerich Leaf, destroy target artifact, and then the threat is gone. I create a treasure token, or I want to cycle from my deck, draw 2 cards. I think Prismari command is super good. It's actually going to see a lot of play, and I would actually put this Prismari command in like tier 2. I'm very generous today. Next up we got Elemental Expressionist, 4 mana 4/4 with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, choose target creature you control. Until end of turn, it gains if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else, and when you exile this creature, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. I think this card is absolutely terrible. I think nobody's going to play it. It's basically situational protection, but you need to hold an instant open to make this worthwhile, and even with a board wipe, against the board wipe, it's not that great. So I think this is like, I think it's going to see 0 play in Constructed. Alright, next up we've got another dual modal card, Tornsculpt and Flamethrower Sonata. So let's take a total look at Tornsculpt. The first is a 4 mana 2/2 Merfolk Wizard with Ward 2. So Ward is this new evergreen keyword which says whenever this creature becomes target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless the player pays X, in this case 2. So it's got some added protection. And when Tornsculpt enters the battlefield, exile an instant associate card from your graveyard, put a number of 1/1 counters on Tornsculptor equal to half that card's mana value rounded up. So for Tornsculptor, it benefits from having big CMC instant sorceries in your graveyard. But I think at the end of the day, what you're going to want to do with Prismari is use those instant sorceries in your graveyard to your benefit. By casting them from your graveyard for free, for example, or getting them back for your graveyard. And Tornsculpt also needs a really high CMC instant sorcery to make sense. Something like, ideally you want to have, if you're hitting an 8 CMC or 8 mana value instant sorcery, this is getting 4 1/1 counters, and then you have a 4 mana 6s with Ward 2. But is that good enough in Standard? I don't think at all. So I think the front side is pretty trash and won't see any play. So let's take a look at the back side. Flamethrower Sonata. It's a sorcery for 2 mana. Discard a card and draw a card. When you discard an instant or sorcery card this way, Flamethrower Sonata deals damage equal to that card's mana value to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. I think this backside is actually really good because it gives you a way to cycle through your deck, get your big CMC or big mana value stuff into your graveyard. And really for 2 mana you can discard something for like 4, 5, 6 CMC and just deal massive amounts of damage to creatures or planeswalkers. It's at sorcery speed though, but I think that's fine for this type of effect. And I can see Flamethrower Sonata being played in the right deck, and in the right deck only actually, because obviously you need a deck where you play high CMC instant or sorceries. Otherwise this doesn't make any sense. So you're fairly restricted in your deck building with this, but in the right deck I think Flamethrower Sonata is really nice. And then if you don't need it, you just play the creature side. So in that case, Tornsculptor, is actually fine just because you have the option to do it. So because of that, I think I would put this, where do we have it? It's here, right? Yeah. I'm going to put this like tier 3 category because I think Flamethrower Sonata is going to see some play. Next we got Culmination of Studies. You pay X blue red for a sorcery. It says exile the top X cards in your library. For each land card exile this way, create a treasure token. For each blue card exile this way, draw a card. For each red card exile this way, Culmination of Studies deals 1 damage to each opponent. So let's think about this card. Let's think about a realistic casting cost. Let's say you pay X equals 2. So you pay a total of 4 mana to exile the top 2 cards of your library. And let's say you exile a land card and a blue card. Whoops. This would mean for 4 mana you create a treasure token and you draw a card. Is that good? No, it's actually really bad. But then think about if you exiled a red card and a land card. You dealt 1 damage to your opponent and created treasure tokens for 4 mana. That's absolutely terrible. I think if you think about this card, you realize this card is actually super, super bad. And I think it's going to see 0 plane constructed. Don't see how anybody would want to play this. Next I've got the dual modal Deans. So for blue it's Uvilda, Dean of Perfection, 3 mana 2/2 Djinn Wizard. Has the ability tap. You may exile an instant or sorcery card from your hand and put 3 Hone counters on it. It gets at the beginning of your upkeep, if this card is exiled, remove a Hone counter from it. And when the last Hone counter is removed from this card, if it's exiled you may cast it. It costs 4 less to cast this way. So let's think about this card. First off, let's say you're casting this as early as turn 3. Paying 3 mana for a 2/2, it absolutely dies to anything. It dies to a Storm, it dies to a Frostbite, it dies to a Shock, and so forth. So that's already bad. Then you have to wait a full turn until the turn comes back to you. Then you can tap her. So 1 turn is gone, right? Then you tap her to exile, let's say, an Auron's Epiphany. And then the first turn after that, Hone counter Muse, another turn, and then on the 4th turn after you played this card, the 4th turn after you played this card, you get to cast Ardent Spirit for 4 mana less. So by then it's already turn 7 or 8, and you can't even cast it for free just cause 4 less to cast. I think this is very, very bad. It gets removed super easily, and you basically have to say, I can only exile spells which I know I would want to cast no matter what, because you won't know how the board set is going to look like in like 3-4 turns, right? So I think Ovilda is really, really bad. And let's look at the backside. It's Nassar, Dean of Expression, 5 mana 4 for E3 Shaman. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile top card of each opponent's library. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from among those exiled cards. And you may spend mana, store the mana of any color to cast those spells. And whenever you cast a spell from exile, put a 1/1 counter on Nassar, Dean of Expression. Nassari is way more interesting. The static triggered ability I think is really cool. It just gives an extra card every turn. And note though, it says you may cast spells, right? So you can play land cards to exile, for example, which is a slight downside. But Nassara can give you pretty cool value, and then when you cast those spells from exile, you put a 1/1 counter on it or any other spell from exile. So if you cast adventure creatures or foretold cards, this can get quite big. So I quite like Nassari. However, I think at 5 mana or even at this exact 5 mana cost, I'd rather play, for example, a Goldspan Dragon. It's just more immediate value. And while I do like Nassari, I think at the end of the day, Uvil and Nassari won't see any play at all. So I'll put these in the 0 play category. It's just not good enough. Next, I've got Creative Outburst, another one of those big mana value instants. It costs 7 mana in total. And Creative Outburst deals 5 damage to any target. Look at the top 5 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. And again, you can pay to discard this to create a treasure token. So this can actually be quite good. As we're going to see later in this card review, there are so many ways to reduce cost of instant sorceries with Prismari that I think the goal is going to be to cast this for those exactly 4 mana, 2 blue, 2 red, right? And for 4 mana, you do 5 damage to any target and get to draw a card. Is that good enough? Probably not. It's probably actually not good enough, especially since you've got just so many better spells to play instead. But you can discard this to create a treasure token. I think this is where this can become interesting, right? Because not only do you create treasure tokens so it rams you, but it gets created afterwards into the graveyard, so you can cast it from there somehow. But also, I mean, with this upcoming strategy, I'm thinking a lot about what's it called? Soul Mirror? Is it called Soul Mirror? The like legendary artifact from Throne of Eldraine in blue, which costs 9 mana, but the mana cost gets reduced by 1 for every instant sorcery in your graveyard. Creative Outburst is a way to get more instant sorceries in your graveyard without sacrificing anything, right? You just create a treasure tome, which is really, really cool. So I think actually because of the discard ability, these cards can be really useful because they synergize with so much other stuff. And then, if you play this reduce, it's still fine, it's still good. Paying 4 mana eventually, or playing this for free, deal 5 damage to any target, draw a card basically. I think it's fine, it's not the greatest, but I could see this being played in like, fringe cases. So maybe this is also like a tier 3 deck in like tier 3 category. I'll leave this in tier 3. Actually, I think this is tier 4, let's be realistic. But this card, I leave this in tier 3, I have high hopes. Next up we got Expressive Iteration, 2 mana sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, put one of them on the bottom of your library, and exile one of them. You may play the exile card this turn. I think really great card. Really great card. If you play this, it says you may play the exile card this turn, so as early as turn 2, or no, actually as early as turn 3, you can play this, exile your land drop for the turn, play the land, and then you draw a card and also basically scry, right? Or like, yeah, put the other card on one of the libraries. So I think Expressive Iteration, just really solid value card draw. And I can totally see this being played. I put this into like the tier 2 category. I think it's just very solid card draw. Next I got Maelstrom Muse, now we're talking. It's 4 mana, 2/4 flyer, Jit Wizard. And it says, whenever Maelstrom Muse attacks, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less to cast, where X is Maelstrom uses power as this ability resolves. So, this guy right here can give you a lot of value and reduce stuff by a lot if it stays on board and if it gets to attack. Note what's cool is the trigger is on the attack, it's not on combat damage, so you're guaranteed to get the trigger. And this encourages you to play pump spells like Infuriate. I'm not sure if Infuriate is in standard right now, but it might just be. And because if you can pump this up to like, for example, 5 power, then your next install gets reduced by 5, which is so much. And yeah, I think Maelstrom Muse can see some play, where you're just throwing out big spell after big spell and make your opponent cry. Obviously, this doesn't have any haste or anything, and it dies to a single target removal. However, it doesn't die to a stomp, and it doesn't die to a frostbite because it's got 4 toughness, so that's really, really good. I think Maelstrom Muse belongs into like the like tier 3 category. I think I could see this being played. Yeah, I think if you can pump this, it can be some like tier 3 deck to cheat out those big spells. I think that could be really, really cool. As we got a Prismari Apprentice, 2 mana, 2 Human Charm with Magecraft. Whenever you cast a combination of sorcery spell, Prismari Apprentice can't be blocked this turn. If the spell has a mana value 5 or greater, put a 1/1 counter on Prismari Apprentice. This is also one of the better apprentices, just making stuff unblockable can be really powerful if you pump this and then, just get in for like 5 damage through a pump spell every turn. That's pretty cool. So I see Prismari in, you can either take it into a control direction or into a very aggressive direction. And I think Prismari Apprentice, obviously not great, but I can see this seeing fringe play in like aggressive Prismari decks. Next we got Practical Research, 5 mana instant, draw 4 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard instant or sorcery cards. So this is 5 mana, draw 3 effectively if you discard an instant or sorcery at instant speed. Now, obviously, there can be synergies with discarding stuff, so the discarding part doesn't necessarily need to be a downside. But I'm not sure about this card. I'm not sure if it's actually that good. I think this card, whether this card is good, solely depends on how good it's going to be to put instant sorceries in your graveyard, and really look out for, I think it's called Soul Mirror, I'm not quite sure, but look out for the Throne of Eldraine, a legendary artifact. I think it's going to see a comeback because of Prismari, because of Strixhaven. And practical research, I think, is just, you're already in like Prismari / Izzet colors, so card draw shouldn't be a problem. So do you really want this at like 5 mana? I could see this being played in some experimentation and putting this in like the tier 4 category. Then we got Rutha, Mercurial Artist, 3 mana 1 for Orc Shaman. And you can pay 2 and return Rutha to its owner's hand to copy target instant or source spell you control, and you may choose new targets for the copy. I don't think that's going to see any play. While the effect is very unique and the effect is quite nice, I just don't see. Well, what would be the play played on, right? You play this on turn 3, and what's good is got 4 toughness, can block some stuff, it doesn't tie to Storm or Frostbite, so that's already great. And then turn 4, you basically would cast a 2 mana value spell to copy it, but then Rutha is not on board anymore. I just don't see how this play pattern makes any sense, and because of that, I think Rutha is going to see 0 play. Next we got Elemental Masterpiece, another high mana value spell. It's a 7 mana sorcery. Create 2 4 for blue and red element creature tokens. Again, you can discard to create a treasure token for 2 mana. So again, this discarding stuff with treasure tokens is quite nice because it can ramp you into bigger stuff, and that's I think where this card shines, right? It's because of this discard effect with the treasure token, I think, that these cards can see play, maybe. And I'm already thinking about like synergies with, let's actually look this up. Let's look at Wizard Ikoria Legendary. What's it called? It's Reality Everwise, right? I'm thinking about this card, 3 mana 0/3. Whenever discard 1 or more cards for a first damage turn, draw that many cards. I think there are some really good synergies with these discard this stuff, create treasure token, and Reality Everwise. So it's not that great of a card, but because of this discard aspect, maybe there's some kind of, you know, critical mass you want to have of these types of effect in your deck to create some synergies. So I'm putting this into the tier 4 category. Next we got Ogre Battleseer, 5 mana 3/4 with haste scry 1. Well, won't see any plane constructed. Next up, Prismari Planeswalker, 2 mana 3 for Orc Wizard with Defender and Magecraft. Whenever you cast a copy into a source spell, Prismari Planeswalker can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. Won't see any planes constructed, maybe limited. Next up, we got Spectre Mage, 3 mana 2/2 Bird Charm with Flying. Instant source spells you cast with mana value 5 or greater, cost 1 less to cast. Won't see any play because it's too easy to remove, and if you want to have this effect, just play, I think it's called like Strix, Thunderous Storm. It's a legendary blue creature from Pharaoh's Beyond Death for 5. You can flash it in, it has the same effect, but your 5 mana value spells also can be countered. So this card won't see any play. And then lastly, we actually have a card that will see play. It's Teach by Example. It's an instant 2 mana. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for a copy. So unconditional copying of any next spell you play. I think this is very good. I'll put this into the tier 4 category because it's going to see fringe play. If you follow my channel, you've seen me recently copying burn spells, right, with a Dual Strike. And Dual Strike is limited to 4 mana value spells, or spells with 4 mana value or lower. This doesn't have any restriction, so I think you can occasionally have like 2 of these in the deck, and then it's even enough if you copy like a Storm, but obviously it gets crazy if you copy these high CMC spells. If they're reduced, then it gets really, really juicy. So I think Teach by Example is just good to have this kind of card in Standard. To, you know, have some crazy experimentation with instant sorceries. So I put this in tier 4, and with that we're we've gotten through Prismari. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and stay tuned for my next video on more card reviews. Hey there, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this kind of content and want to see more fresh decks and standard meta decks, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it, and I see you guys soon.